Welcome back. Thank you for joining us on The Explainer tonight. Now, even on a night like this, when we're talking about the unfolding crisis across the country, this is news just in, and we will get you some more details as they continue to come in. There's reports of an apartment building along Naivasha Road near Ilri in Uthiru that has reportedly collapsed. We're getting this information. Actually, the word shouldn't be reportedly. It is that it has collapsed. We've got confirmation from the police of a building in Uthiru along Naivasha Road, right next to Ilri, that has collapsed. We want to get you more details of that. But, you know, in studio with me is Dr. Ahmed Idris, who is the Secretary General of the Kenya Red Cross. You're also getting this information. What more can you tell us about this unfolding situation?
I know it has happened a few minutes ago, about 30 minutes ago. We have two teams, response teams on site from Nairobi branch at the moment. So we'll be getting more details as the search and rescue continues.
It's an apartment building?
It's a 5-story building in the Uthiru area.
Okay.
So that's what we know so far. It's a complete collapse. So we'll get more information in the next few minutes.
All right. And, you know, this was an area that we also saw some floods recently, right?
Yeah.
So there's also quite a bit of issues around the structure of buildings due to the flood waters there.
Look, so we can't at this moment, you know, talk about what caused the building collapse. But one of the first problems, major problems with flood seasons is that, yes, structural integrity of buildings, of bridges, and other, you know, building structures is severely compromised. And that's an area of concern. Why we take seriously after the rains and during the rains to spend more time around assessment of the integrity of buildings, structural integrity of buildings, is to, you know, avoid situations similar to you know, what we experience in collapsed buildings. Yeah. But for this particular one, we can't definitely say that was the cause. Was the cause, right. But look, it also underscores the complexity of response that we have to do as an institution. You know, there's a team right now responding for, you know, to rescue people from that particular building collapse. We have teams responding to health emergencies in different areas, including cholera outbreaks. We have the teams responding to the floods as a search and rescue, the aqua teams responding to search and rescue. So very widespread around the country.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you know, it's complex, the work that you do. And you know, particularly during this flooding season, where sadly we've lost 238 people to date. You know, there's one area today, and then it's another area tomorrow, and all of these areas are, you know, far-flung areas that are far from each other. So paint for us a situation of the country right now. You know, perhaps as broadly as you can.
So from a floods perspective, the easiest way of describing the situation in the country is to say the floods are widespread across the country, affecting 34 counties with different levels of intensity. The highest intensity in the Nairobi area, Tana River, that is the Tana River Basin as a whole, Tana River County, Garissa, Kilifi. In the western Kenya, that is the Nzoia Belt and the Nyando Basin area. So we have a widespread in terms of the areas that are affected. The displacement around the country now at 47,000, above 47,000 households. That is a large displacement. I can easily say households. Yes. I can easily say we've not witnessed that magnitude of displacement as a country since the post-election violence. So very easily summarize it that way, so that we can know the magnitude of the humanitarian situation and the complexity of the response that we have to mount as a country. That's in terms of the displacement. Now the needs gets a bit more complex. In some places we have you know, a complex emergency situation. We have floods in an area that we were responding to food insecurity. So we have a caseload from the last drought period and food insecurity.
Which was the worst.
Which was the worst in several seasons. That are still in need of and receiving food assistance. So I think it's up to about 1.5 million people who were continuously in need of food assistance from a food security perspective.
Yeah.
In Tana River, now we have reported cases of cholera. I think so far as a country, we've registered about 35 cases recently, some very active, including in the Tana River County as we speak. Yeah. So, how to describe it? It's a complex humanitarian situation across the country.
Right, and I want us to, we'll come back and talk about, you know, what's unfolding, particularly with cholera and what, you know, the aftermath of this. So, you know, by painting that picture, what are the needs of, you know, the people in these 47,000 households that have been disrupted? So
let's divide the needs to immediate needs, current needs, which is the life-saving interventions. And the life-saving interventions are in the form of access to shelter, because people have either their homes destroyed or they cannot live in their homes because they're underwater. So how do we provide temporary shelter? And that's the concept of displacement and displacement camps. So that's the first need that we're trying to provide collectively within the national response team to the floods. The second need is around access to food. Look, Yvonne, remember, a huge part of the people displaced were also subsistence farmers along the River Tana in the western area who have lost their livelihood. So we have to provide food for them today, but also try to think about what we do to support them in terms of recovery until they get back on their feet. So access to food. The other part is access to medical care. We have a number of health facilities that are not functional across the country. And people have also been displaced, have moved further away from the health facilities that they ordinarily seek medical attention. So we have to mount integrated medical outreaches that are mobile in nature, going to where people are. We have to provide clean water to those who are displaced within the displacement camps. So access to clean water and access to sanitation facilities, so temporary toilet facilities and so on. What does that mean? And as you heard the Deputy President speak on this matter yesterday on behalf of the National Floods Steering Committee, it is a complex situation. The needs are complex, they're huge, and we are trying to organize ourselves as a country, the many agencies who are responding to these emergencies, to have a concerted and a coordinated effort so that everyone can be reached.
Right, yes, and we'll get back to speaking about that, the work and how it is organized. Let's just remind you of the news that is reaching our newsrooms tonight, which is of a building along Naivasha Road that has collapsed. The building is located near the International Livestock Research premises, that's ILRI. Both the National Police Service and the Kenya Red Cross have confirmed the occurrence with no information yet on whether there have been any casualties. Our crew will be bringing us more information from the scene, hopefully within the course of this live newscast. Those are pictures from that scene there. It is in Uthiru area of a building collapse. We're here with Dr. Ahmed Idris, who informs us that it is a 5-story building, and the Nairobi teams from the Red Cross are already on hand to provide search, rescue, and whatever needs will be required from this unfolding crisis. The cause of that building collapse is obviously not yet known. But a lot has been happening in the country over the last couple of weeks with respect to buildings and, of course, the ongoing floods that have ravaged several parts of the country. So once again, that 5-story apartment building in Uthiru along Naivasha Road right next to ILRI that has collapsed. Police on the scene have confirmed the same, as well as the Kenya Red Cross, who are on site. Now, stay with us here for more information on the same. And so, Dr. Idris, I hope you're able to, even as we have this conversation, just sort of check your wires and
we're trying to multitask. Yes.
Yes, I know you'll require some multitasking to just let us know of any information and any help that is required there. So when it comes to the issue of the floods, you were talking about how this is a complicated situation. You've talked about the needs. And so how do we mobilize, what is needed for this? Because, I mean, even in terms of the response mechanism from the Kenya Red Cross, quite a bit of resources are required for this, human and otherwise.
Yeah. So it's a huge response that is, in terms of the costing, that is required, not just from the Kenya Red Cross, but from the country at large. So the current response has been costed in terms of what the immediate financial needs will be and what the long-term needs will be in terms of recovery. And right now we are looking at a total of about 7 billion to sustain a national operation across the country, not just for Kenya Red Cross, but all the other agencies. And so and I'll speak about that response from three perspectives. One is we have a national response and a national approach to responding to the floods. And so the National Disaster Operations Center, under the leadership of Lieutenant General Nkoimo, has been providing leadership. Major General Koimo has been providing leadership for the country in terms of coordinating all of us. And so we're working under that umbrella. And the idea of coming together is so that each institution can display and can put to use the skill set its best, and so that we share, responsibilities, and we share the cost across institutions, and so far so good. That has been working very well. So, in terms of our immediate needs as an organization, we are currently mounting an operation that has about 30,000 people across the country. So we are looking at about 30,000 volunteers across the country, very active in the operation in one way or another. So that's a huge infrastructure to maintain. So that's generally our first cost. The logistics around how do we reach the different places. So we require vehicles, we require fuel for vehicles, we require food for foods in secure communities. We require water treatment and water treatment chemicals and equipment so that we are able to provide clean sanitation across clean water and sanitation across the country. So it's a costly response. It's one that we had not, as an organization, imagined will require this level of resources, and we're working with our partners to mobilize the required resources. Yeah,
I mean, this is a massive operation, 30,000 people. So, I mean, give us a typical scenario of how this, a typical response mechanism or initiative works. How do you hear about where something, or where there's an emergency? Then how do you mobilize the resources? Just help us understand how Kenya Red Cross responds to a particular incident.
So first we have to remember this is our primary business. And so as an institution, we've invested over a period of time to strengthen our response capacity to emergencies, including floods. So that's the first investment. It's an investment over a number of years. Investment in capacity of individuals, investment in resources, and investment in the materials that are required for this response. The second one is we are a decentralized organization, so we have branches in all the 47 counties under the leadership of county coordinators who have their volunteers and some staff at that level. So we are well, integrated at the community level to be able to get information as and when it happens, because our volunteers, our staff come from the communities all over the country. We normally say as a joke that we are the most decentralized organization after the church and the government, and it's something we are really proud of. 276,000 volunteers all over the country who are part of their communities, who are integrated in their communities, and who are able to mobilize on a quick and a short notice. But what does that mean for us to be able to succeed? One, we have to invest in the appropriate training for our volunteers.
Yeah.
And this is an investment that we have to do throughout the year, irrespective of whether we have emergencies or not.
Right.
And so as an organization, whenever we are not responding to emergencies, we are busy preparing for the next one.
Okay.
And that's why we've tried to put an efficient model of response. So ideally, all our emergencies are reported to us either from the community directly to us through our toll-free numbers, which are operating nationally 24/7, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year throughout.
Yeah.
So we get calls coming in from the community reporting a specific incident, or we get calls from our volunteers or our county coordinators alerting us on a building situation or a situation that is building. So I'll give an example. This collapsed building in Uthiru was reported by one of our volunteers to the branch, and the branch has reported to the national level.
Yeah.
And even as they're reporting to the HQ, the branch has already taken the initiative to respond.
Okay.
They will do the first assessment, they will see what is required, and then they're going to request for surge capacity from the rest of the society. So it's really a regimented process of responding to emergencies. The easiest way, by the way, to describe it is honestly a tubatishi. It is not something that we are just doing. We woke up and we are responding to emergencies.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into that process before the emergency. There's a lot that gets into it in terms of coordination. We have very detailed protocols on responding to emergencies, depending on the kind of emergency. And we have people who are trained to provide leadership for that kind of response.
Right, but I'm sure you can't reach everybody.
Yeah, we can't reach everyone. We try to reach everyone, but we can't reach everyone because it is a function of resources to start with. I think the resources that are required for us to reach everyone is just not there.
What has that been like in this particular situation? Because you have said that the level of displacement and need that we have seen is we haven't seen this since the post-election violence of 2007, 2008. What has this meant for the resources of the Kenya Red Cross?
Yeah.
How far has it stretched it?
So any disaster operation has a capacity of eating into the savings of the institution, but we do not regret it because that is our core business. That's the first thing. Second thing is, at any given time, whenever there's an emergency like this one, we put an appeal to our partners, to our donors, to support us in responding to that emergency. And in particular, within our colleagues, sister Red Cross societies, Red Cross and Red Crescent societies all over the world. But Yvonne, what has been happening the last 3 years is that the total financial aid that is available to Kenya to respond to its own needs has been reducing, over a period of time.
Yeah, the world is changing.
Yeah, the world is changing. Yeah. And the developed countries that primarily have been the source of, resources for us to respond to emergencies have their own challenges to deal with. Whenever we have large-scale emergencies across the world, like we are having now the Gaza operations, Sudan as a major humanitarian operation, Kenya is not a priority country for many of the donors. And that's the reality. What does that mean? As a country, we have to, stand up and respond to our own issues and our own needs as a society and as a country.
Yeah.
And that was the call primarily yesterday from the Deputy President to say, it was a message of request, yes, to our development partners, but also to Kenyans to respond and support the national flood response.
Okay, and when we talk about part of the responses is also assisting with evacuations. Now, the government has, in some cases, forcibly evacuated residents. So what does an evacuation process look like, Idris?
So the evacuation during an emergency,
yes,
or the evacuation to prevent the emergency?
Both.
So evacuation during emergencies, are inspired by the needs, in the sense that at that point in time, the households or the people affected are not able to stay in the place that they ordinarily call a home.
Yeah.
And so it's voluntary, it's largely pushed by the context that they find themselves in. And so the structure of support that has been offered from a coordinated perspective, including government, is for those individuals to move to safer grounds. And so I must say, when we were planning for the evacuation spaces, we did not anticipate this number of people to be to need evacuation.
Yeah, yeah.
And so even when we see a number of people criticizing that we've not put in place sufficient measures of providing for safe evacuations, we have to understand that at the end of the day, these are numbers that we hadn't planned for from our contingency. We didn't anticipate to reach this. So overall, we have evacuation centers that are, are pre-identified before an emergency, and these are largely in schools, so that we provide temporary facilities.
And what happens? What do you give them when they are in, in this state? And how long? We know what the Ministry of Interior has said in terms of, those centers that have been mapped out and, how long they will be there.
Yeah.
But so tell us, when people are evacuated from their homes, essentially everything they have known, do they get some sort of starter pack for that? What does that look like? And how long do you anticipate that they, stay in these areas before they can go back home?
So our standard response mechanism provides the families who are displaced with capacity to, maintain themselves at least for 3 months within the displacement camp. So we provide temporary shelter in form of tarpaulins and tents to provide, temporary accommodation. Not comfortable, but at the end of the day, to protect you from the excesses of the weather. We provide food to, last the displaced families for a period of time. We provide basic, equipment, household equipment, especially kitchen sets with utensils required and so on. And we provide beddings, so blankets, sleeping mats from the national government, mattresses and so on. So that is not meant to replace the comfort of a person's home.
Right.
And I think we have to accept at the end of the day, it is a difficult context of displacement. We are trying to provide the minimal, possible assistance that we can give to families so that they can withstand that period of displacement. Not the comforts of home, but something to keep them comfortable. In some places, depending on the needs, we add other parts, equipment or items to the support mechanisms. So if the person is a person with disability, we try to support them with their disability needs. If the families have children who are under 5, there's special targeting that is given to those families in terms of the type of food that is given to those families, so that we provide foods that are friendly to children under 5. If there are cases of malnourishment, in those families also specific assistance is given to them to address that malnourishment and so on. So it largely also depends with the location and the the demographics of that particular displacement. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And so overall, what are the items most needed in the country? If you're able to, I mean, I know obviously the needs are not homogeneous across the country. It's based on need and specifics. But what would you say are some of the key issues, key items and services that are required by those? So
in terms of items, the first one priority is food and dry foods.
Yeah.
So cereals and so on. So dry foods that can last for a period and can be delivered to different parts of the country. The second one is water treatment, chemicals and equipment. That is a huge need for it across the country. We're in need of medication, so medicines for treatment and so on. I know a number of people have been asking whether they can donate clothes and so on, which is needed. But look, Yvonne, we don't want donation processes to also become, opportunities for dumping. At the end of the day, you have to donate something that is usable by the persons in displacement, because we also have an obligation to be careful that we do not insult the dignity of the displaced further than the difficulties that they're having. So items that are needed, items that you will have needed. The best way I will put it is, if you're considering a donation, ask yourself, if you were displaced, what will you have needed?
Right.
And from that particular perspective, you're welcome to donate across the country.
And people can still donate. So, with your advisory in hand, if anyone wants to do that, so, how do they go about it?
Yeah, so yesterday, the Deputy President gave guidelines on how that we can do the donations at the NDOC, at the Kenya Red Cross facilities. We will be more than happy to receive those donations.
Sorry.
Excuse me. We'll be more than happy to receive those donations so that we can transmit them to the affected communities.
Okay, there's one question here as we close our discussion. Omukuba Evans inquiring about the floods and the volunteer opportunities. He says, ask Dr. Idris, given the current floods, can you provide info on availability of human labor? I think you talked about the number of volunteers you have around the country, including, you said 30,000 people working on the floods specifically. And then his second question is whether the organization is actively accepting volunteers to support the relief efforts. Yeah,
so we are actively receiving volunteers to support the effort, but we have to take individuals through our process before they're deployed. And so that we want whoever is, deployed to support our operations to understand what are our core values, what are our basic principles, what do we stand for, what are our rules.
So how does that recruitment work?
So recruitment of volunteers is done at the branch level. As I said, there are 47 branches across the country. So the easiest place is for you to go to your nearest branch, indicate your interest to volunteer, and the rest of the process will be guided from that.
How long does the training take before?
So it depends with what you're being trained for. So we have specialized volunteers. So we have volunteers who specialize on, for example, aqua rescue, our heroes for this particular response. And those are not ordinary volunteers. They're specific skill sets that they have before they come to us, and they're specific skill sets that they've been trained for. So we are not just walking in and then you're put on the next boat to support in water rescue. So there's some highly specialized trainings for some core skill. So volunteers, for example, who are involved in disease control, those ones have also specialized trainings on their own. Then we have the other general volunteers who are supporting the society as a whole. The period of training is shorter, some with trainings that go up to 5 days, others up to 2 weeks. So it depends on what you're being trained for.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. And, we'll continue to follow the work that you do. And indeed, when you're able to, perhaps you could continue to update us on the news that is breaking today. Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed Idris, Secretary General of the Kenya Red Cross, on the response they're mounting across the country and what is needed during this flood season, conducting search and rescue operations, providing humanitarian assistance. What stands out, 47,000 households displaced, with about 1.5 million in need of food assistance. They've got 30,000 volunteers out there who are doing the work that is needed the most. A scene not seen in this country since 2007, 2008, when we all know what happened in this country. We'll continue to update you on that. But before we take this break, let me just remind you of the news that's in regarding a collapsed building along Naivasha Road. That is in Udhiru area. It is next to ILRI, the building located near ILRI, which is the International Livestock Research Institute premises. Both the National Police Service and the Kenya Red Cross, who are here with us on the program, have confirmed the occurrence. We still have no information on whether there have been any casualties, but we have a crew on site and we will let you know what is needed and what more is coming out of this breaking